I want to share with you a story that has been very pivotal to my life. And it is when I stopped going to church to strengthen and deepen my relationship with God. Sounds counterproductive, I know, but hear me out. I had been going to church my whole life, spent more than a decade in church leadership under a pastor and his wife that were absolutely amazing, well, are absolutely amazing. I learned and grew in ways by attending that church that I know for a fact I never would have been able to grow in that manner had it not only been for the structure of a church setting, but for these particular individuals as my leadership. And as my children got older, I began to feel a pull to leave the church that I had been at for more than a decade and move to a different church. Times were changing, things were changing. There was no ill will at the church that I was leaving. I didn't have any problems or anything like that. I just noticed that my family in particular needed a change, which made it very difficult. It's easy to leave a place where you feel like you're not valued, you feel like you're not being cared for, or even easier when something horrible happens and blows up and you just gotta go, right? You get to leave and be like, those people were awful, that's why I left. That's what made it difficult to leave, because I had none of that. I had nothing but great encounters to speak of at this church. And so as we moved to a different church, I started to realize that some of the challenges that I was having that was calling me to something different was just indicative of church, period. Nothing bad, no church hurt, nothing I have to say, church is horrible because, none of that. But I just knew that I needed something different. And so we stopped going to church around the pandemic. And I started to notice my relationship with God began to blossom, and it began to exceed borders that I didn't even know that I had. Because in the times and situations that I was in the past, everything felt like it was perfect. The timing was perfect. The situations that were teaching me, the people that were teaching me seemed like it was perfect. And I was in a position where I thought this was it. This is the end all to be all. But God had been calling me to something different. And so for me to no longer be at a church at all, be simply, strengthening my relationship with God one to one without between me, a pastor, a church, and then God, my relationship really flourished. And I began to see tools outside of the Bible and outside of church that I never would have explored if I had stayed going in a church setting. Because there's a lot of things out here in the world that is taboo to church people. And because I was no longer in the church, it was almost like a little bit of relief. Like I didn't have to worry about this thing or that thing, because now I was open to listening. I had gotten to a place where I realized if my relationship with God was as strong as it needed to be, there wasn't any amount of negative talk or taboo talk that could deter me, because I no longer felt like I needed to adhere to these hard, fast rules and keep, certain subjects out of my mouth and out of my ears, because it might mess up my commitment to God, or it may mess up my relationship with God. I was just open, and I found that a lot of the things that I didn't want to hear and I didn't entertain in a church setting actually were a segue to a deeper, higher life with the tools that I had in me. There was a life out there, or a relationship out there with God, where I got to be more in control, because God creating me in his image, trusting me with what he created, I actually had a lot more of a say. And I actually had a lot more creative freedom, if you will. Not, playing around with sin, or hurting people, or taking advantage of people, or any of the things that any of you might consider to be, against God's will. None of that. I'm just saying a lot of the things, when people talk about the universe, and, the universe was created to XYZ, a lot of people look at it like that is being put in the place of God. But I always said to people, well, who do you think created the universe? If, right? Like the sun, the moon, the stars. And so why would it be silly or taboo that the person or the entity that created those things would create them in a way that I would be able to use them in my walk and in my daily life, so that people could see me and see a good thing in me that would make them want to do different things in their life, right? It also put me in a position where I stopped feeling like every time I shared some wisdom with someone, I had to make sure that I gave God the credit, quoted the scripture, and all of the things, because I was embodying what it was that needed to be embodied in order to live the life that I am capable of living, which then in turn shows people around me, oh, wow, that's a possibility. Even people who may have a challenge with the church, or with God, or with the universe, they could see me and how I'm living my life, and see the joy in me and my family and the people around me, and think, I wonder what that is. And they could then map out their lives to live their lives in full, without having to worry about if they're adhering to the right rules, if they are good enough, things like that. And it has brought me all these years later, now that I'm 49 years old, knocking on the door. I'm in the hallway of 50. I'm not quite knocking on the door yet, because that's not towards the end of the year. But now that I am knocking on the door of 50, I can tell you that at this time in my life, even with any challenges that might be going on in my life, any uphill battles, any projects that I'm having to overtake that may be the biggest thing that I've ever come against in my life, I can still tell you without a doubt, I am the happiest and most joy-filled I have ever been. And I am the most confident in God and in me that I have been in my entire life. Now, am I telling you to leave the church? I am not. I am just telling you that there may be some things that you're called to that seem the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. But don't X those out. Don't tune those out. At the very least, explore it to weed it out. Because if you are who you say you are in this relationship, then your understanding and your knowing will be able to withstand any new information that would be counterproductive. So I felt like I was already, and many of you may have felt like that, I was already the kind of person that was confident and could make decisions and make moves and not be afraid. But I realized I was only very confident in comparison to the people around me, not to my complete capability. And I often say that when people, a lot of times when people are competitive, they're competitive and they're not living up to their full potential because they're just focused on the people around them and beating the people around them, or being better than the people around them, not being the very best that they can be. And so I realized that I had only scratched the surface for me. By normal, regular standards, yes, I'm a very confident woman. Yes, I'm very strong. And I still am. But I'm just saying, once I focused on a one-to-one relationship and I removed what was in between me that needed to go, that I was told that needed to go, I realized I had only scratched the surface of what I was capable of. And it gave me more depth and dimension in all of the roles that I play in my life as a daughter, sister, cousin, mom, wife, friend, business owner, stranger that you might run into in the grocery store. It really has been a multi-dimensional experience, and it has taken me to higher heights than I even imagined, because I thought I was, you know, 10 feet above the mountaintop to begin with, as far as, how my life was going and how my life looked. And it was, but now I am in a place where the way that I thought I would feel when all my dreams came true, when I achieved all my goals and all the desires, of my heart, I feel that way now. And I haven't come near to, achieve all the goals and reach all the high heights that I know that I have in me. And it is because I deepened this relationship to a degree where I trust me over anybody else in this journey, no matter what their role is, no matter if they are my therapist, my pastor, my first lady, my counselor, my astrologist, my whatever. I trust me and my judgment now more than anybody's. I used to look to certain people, look to my husband, look to see, how my sons feel about a certain something. And now I don't do that. And I also don't do it begrudgingly, like, well, they just gonna have to, they just gonna have to go with what feels right to me, or they just gonna have to go head on. I don't care what they think. It's actually not that. I actually care more now what they think than I did before, because now I know that it's safe to care. It's safe for me to care about what they say and how they feel. And it's safe for them to share their heart with me, because I don't feel anymore like, but if they share that with me, it might get me off track. It might have me think in a different way. It's not true. And it's never been true. I just have been able to finally see it for what it is. So have you ever had a situation, whether it's church or something else, where you eliminated the elders or the professionals or the experts in that field and just did a one-on-one to strengthen yourself? Did it go well for you? Was it a challenge? You got to tell me.